All right. So we just heard about the economy. We heard some great stuff about real estate development in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Heard about the Opportunity Zone. Now we're going to hear about the South Florida commercial real estate market and what's going on out there. These guys are the key people with NAI from the Keys to Melbourne. We've got Jeremy Larkin, Miami and the Keys, Kenneth Kurtz, Fort Lauderdale and Melbourne, Neil Merin, West Palm Beach and Boca. So I've got a few topics here. We'll see how long we can go. Things that I think you'll be interested in. The first one involves transportation-oriented developments, the new rail lines. You know, obviously up north in the Northeast, the other parts of the country, we've had transportation in place. In South Florida, we're squeezing it in where it didn't exist before. We have Metro Mover expansion, possibly over to Miami Beach, north up 27th Avenue. We've got Virgin and Brightline. There's a lot of people here that came here through Brightline. That's really good to hear. More people coming to Miami and being able to get up north, possibly until over to Orlando soon. We also may have stations in Aventura and Boca. So my first question, gentlemen, are what are your thoughts on the impact of these projects on the region generally and in your specific marketplace? And what projects do you believe may be on the horizon? I'll just throw it out, gentlemen. You want to start with Jeremy? Work back.
Yes, sir.
Okay, start with.
All right.
Okay.
Brightline right now isn't as much of an effect in Broward County because we're central between Palm Beach and Dade. So it's still, unless you're right next to the Brightline station, it's still quicker to drive to Dade or Palm Beach County. But I think where we're going to see the real influx of economic advantages when they extend Brightline up to Orlando. Brightline now has received, I think, $1.7 billion in tax-deferred bonds to do this expansion. And simultaneously, while doing the expansion up to Orlando, they're going to be putting in an additional station in the Treasure Coast, which will either be in Fort Pierce or Stewart. And they're now doing a feasibility study in Cocoa to run that up to the Space Coast, which is going to additionally provide access to Port Canaveral, and then a possible extension all the way up to Jacksonville. And when you look at the tourism here in South Florida, we currently have, I think, 45 million tourists come down to South Florida last year, but brought $40 billion to our economy. And when you look at just Orlando alone, last year they had a record 75 million tourists, and that brought $70 billion to their economy. So when you connect Brightline to Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Dade County, if just some of that money trickles down to our economies, that's going to be a huge benefit.
You know, I just want to add on to that. If you read the bond offering for Brightline, their business plan originally was to capture 10% of the market that goes to Orlando and Miami that does both the cruise and the theme parks. They estimated that to be 10 million riders a year that do both. So that was originally the whole plan. I want to talk about mass transit here in Florida that hasn't existed, has been tried, and the difference now possibly that more mass transportation makes. Tri-Rail's been with us now 21 years, but unfortunately, due to politics, it ended up on the wrong railroad tracks. And we've never been able to really stimulate transportation-oriented development. We've looked at it, we've tried, it just wasn't in the right place. Our coastal cities are our urban area, and urban areas are where you get development around TOD. If you look at cities that didn't have mass transportation brought in later, like Washington, D.C., brought in their metro line in 1978, their suburbs that were flat grew because it was all around an urban area. I believe that Brightline Virgin is a game changer, both in development around the stations and near the stations, but also in the region's reputation on a global basis. I'm very impressed with the way people are responding to the use of this high-speed, comfortable rail line. I see, and contrary to what you're saying, I'm seeing development starting to percolate around the Brightline station in Fort Lauderdale.
Directly around
the station. The county and city government are going to combine to a new headquarters adjacent to the station. They're going to bring the Panthers in across the street. from the station so people can use this kind of transportation rather than driving out to the Everglades to go to sporting events. It's allowing people also to move through our region very comfortably. I'm recovering from some surgery. My doctor is based in Fort Lauderdale. He lives in Las Olas Isles. He's probably going to move his practice to the new hospital for special services in downtown West Palm Beach. And when I looked at him, I said, well, are you going to move to West Palm Beach? He goes, no, I'm going to have my wife drive me to the Brightline station, and I'm going to take a nice 37-minute ride, and I'll have somebody from the hospital pick me up, and I'll do surgery, and I'll have a nice, comfortable ride home, and it'll be easier than commuting from Las Olas Isles out to Weston right now to do the procedures that I do. That's amazing to be able to move that kind of talent around, and I think that more than the development, that'll drive not just around the stations, but it'll make each of our cities that have stations in them very viable. And Miami, with that grand central station, is a perfect example.
Absolutely. Well, there we go. So, I mean, first off, I'm going to be meeting someone from Palm Beach for lunch next week. He's taking Brightline. I'm going to pick him up. We're going to have lunch. Put him back on Brightline. Instead of 4 hours commuting back and forth, it's 2. Plus, while he's on the train, he can do the work. He can work for 2 hours. So it is a game changer. You can actually have lunch with someone from Palm Beach in Miami, and they don't suffer the loss of productivity. If you take a look at the overall picture, starting with downtown, Brightline, this Miami Central Station, the economic activity around it has been phenomenal. The fact that they have managed to be able to connect with the Metro Mover, with the Metro Rail, as well as bringing a link from Tri-Rail into the Central Station, is creating a real transportation node that is amazing. Metro Rail can get you from the airport to the Central Station. It could not get you to the port, but Brightline has now solved that. They're putting in a link to the port. So you've got the core density that's already being built in downtown. If you go and start to take a look at a lot of these stations on the Metro rail lines, you'll start to see the massing of density. But the best example I can tell you is drive down South Dixie Highway. 5 years ago, not a whole lot of construction going on. Now it's becoming essentially a concrete canyon with the massing of 10, 15, 20-story projects around the stations because of the ability to create the density to bring people to the station. That's the bad news. That's the good news. 5 years ago, if someone said, hey, let's go downtown for a meeting, no one would say, are you taking the train? Now that's the first question out of their mouth. Are you taking the train, or are you forcing yourself to drive?
I want to wrap this subject because we have limited time and I want to talk about the markets, but we all are observing locally what's happening to us. I think if you take a step back and you understand what the growth of transportation, mass transportation on a 21st century level is on people's opinion of South Florida, Europeans understand this much better than we do. They're looking and saying now there's a region in the United States that's working the way we work, that has clean, high-speed rail lines that, I hate to use the euphemism, but all the trains run on time. And we're avoiding, or we're growing out of the mess that we were rapidly becoming with just another traffic car congested U.S. city like Los Angeles or Atlanta. So I think on an international basis and on a national basis, it's improving our image dramatically.
Okay. Well, that's the good news, guys. Bad news. Sea rise, climate change. Venice is flooding. Today's Wall Street Journal said that Italy declared a state of emergency to release funds to repair following the highest tide in 50 years. Yesterday's headline, Miami Herald, sea rise could force new Florida buildings to elevate another foot. I'm starting to see the flood zone elevations in residential real estate listings. We're going to go to possibly to some risk-based flood insurance, no longer governmental subsidies, and it's going to go to actual risk, and it's going to be priced accordingly. So, gentlemen, tell us your thoughts on how this issue will impact us, including on coastal construction, property valuations, et cetera.
Unfortunately or fortunately, Miami has become the poster city for climate change in the United States. I mean, I have some millennial nieces who are big Earth fair people out in San Francisco, Berkeley area, and all they talk about is Miami's going to be underwater. So this is unfortunately not only impacting us physically, but it's impacting us globally in the negative way that I just talked about, Brightline, Virgin, impacting us positively. I will tell you that we don't hear as much of it further up the coast yet. Miami seems to be the low point on it, and I'm going to let Jeremy address on that. But Miami is always the first thing that's thrown out in global warming in the United States in discussions.
That's all jealousy. Everybody wants to be down here. Perfect example, we had a hurricane a few years ago. If you remember, Brickell Avenue, 8 to 10 feet of water on it because of the storm surge. Not a single building within the occupiable space took an inch of water. So the construction codes in place have been already predetermined to get us to 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road. So we have time to prepare for sea rise change and for climate change. And it's going to take a local, state, and federal team to put together a plan to figure out how to solve the problem. It's way beyond my pay grade.
You know, you have to remember, this is, unfortunately, like I said, we're a poster child for it, but if you look at what 4 feet of water from Hurricane Sandy did to lower New York City, the damage was way greater than 8 feet of water on Brickell Avenue, because those cities in the Northeast, which are also on the coast, are not built to the same standards that we are here. And I mean, you know, now look at our buildings. So you go down to the Keys, nobody can build on the first floor. Right? So I think we're better prepared, actually, for sea level rise in Florida than the rest of the country is. And besides, it's going to create more beachfront.
My wife and I are pretty excited because we live in a high elevation house, and we're hoping we'll have waterfront property one day. So. Okay, so today's Herald had the headline.
Wait. Fort Lauderdale is.
Yeah. That's all right.
My apologies.
I just want to add one quick point. In Fort Lauderdale, we don't see a lot of sea level problems. There is some flooding in some of the residential aisles when you have a full moon and a high tide. But another aspect of climate change that we can think of, and I'm a Florida native and an avid scuba diver, and I've seen over the years a lot of deterioration in our natural coral reefs. And that's due to an increased salinity, higher water temperatures, the pollution, and tourism being such a big part of our economy. If we kill off our artificial reefs, which is one reason a lot of tourists come down to South Florida, that's going to have a significant impact on our economy, and we need to really look at that and start addressing it more seriously.
Absolutely. So we're going to close with their prognostications on the future. So today's Herald said, study shows Miami real estate delivers strong returns. Basically, owning a home in Miami has a better IRR than New York, San Francisco, DC, Boston, Chicago, New York, LA. Miami real estate's appreciated 58% over the last 10 years. Fort Lauderdale, 65%. West Palm Beach, 64%. So, gentlemen, tell me what's going to happen, and what do you think might precipitate a downturn, if any?
2020, no downturn. Through the election, I see only positive economic growth. It's going to be not necessarily robust, but it's going to be very, very solid. Simple metrics. In-migration from the Northeast as well as offshore. Low tax rates, bringing more people in. And the activity at the port is just blowing doors. If you're not studying the Port of Miami, you really need to. Cruise ship passengers year over year, up 15 to 16%. Every single month this year, and will continue next year. 3 more terminals are being either built or planned to be built. If you simply do the math of 3 cruise ships a week times the number of passengers, you get an awful lot of people coming into the market. They need hotel rooms, they need airfares, they need airplane flights, they need rental cars, they need food and beverage, and you need an awful lot of space to provide for the logistics, supplies, and support. So I see a lot of new construction in the industrial sector. Hotel market is strong and will continue to be strong, and food and beverage and retail growth should be very, very comfortable.
Neil?
Palm Beach County is in, and you pointed out, has the highest IRR. Palm Beach County is going to be a high growth market. Unlike normal economics, where jobs create rooftops. In Florida, the economy is rooftops create jobs. Palm Beach County has, in the last 3 years, approved over 125,000 new housing units that haven't been built yet. We had the land that didn't get built when 2008, when the market collapsed. We're the rest of the build out of South Florida. That's going to bring tremendous demand for doctors, lawyers, specialty practices, businesses relocating, corporate executives coming down here because of SALT and other reasons. So, and you take on top of that, while we're having huge growth in residential, our commercial real estate market, retail, office, industrial, over the last 5 years has added maybe 7% new product, maybe about 2% a year. So there's a lot of headroom left to go in rates, in occupancy, in absorption and development in Palm Beach County.
Ken?
In Fort Lauderdale, in the past few years, we've had a really tight market as far as vacancy rates. But this past year, we've actually seen an increase in vacancy rates across all product types. Office, retail, industrial have all increased in vacancy. And where you might expect the rental rates to decrease because of that increased vacancy, it's actually gone the other way. Rental rates for both all market types, office, retail, industrial, have all increased. And I think part of the vacancy might be a little bit skewed because there was a lot of recent development and new product put online in all the product types. But that's going to stop because in Broward County, we don't have very much developable land left. And we've actually entered a new phase, which is actually a demolition phase, where in the past 12 months, we've seen, I think, about 375,000 square feet of office demolished, 380,000 square feet of retail has been demolished, and 450,000 square feet of old industrial properties have been leveled. And that's all in the last 12 months.
What are they being replaced with?
A combination of industrial first, then office, and then retail.
I think that's it. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Very informative.